An elderly black man was calmly making a phone call when a young police officer accused him of impersonating military personnel and arrested him on the spot. What she didn't realize was that he was a decorated 4-star general. What followed next shocked the young officer. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. It was a scorching Wednesday afternoon in the deep south. The kind of day when the air itself feels heavy with heat and history. The kind of day when every sound echoes sharper and every glance lingers longer. And on that day, General Richard Elias Carter, a man whose name was etched into the annals of American military history, a decorated 4-star general who had commanded thousands in battle and spent for decades defending a nation that often failed to defend men who looked like him, pulled into a small gas station on the outskirts of a quiet southern town, his black SUV glinting beneath the relentless sun. And as he stepped out, wearing his full olive green service uniform, not for vanity, but out of ritual respect, because he was en route to place flowers on the grave of his fallen comrade, who had been buried nearby, the ribbons and medals across his chest shimmering, like silent confessions of the sacrifices they represented. He seemed out of place, yet profoundly rooted, a figure of dignity in a setting too small to comprehend the weight of his presence. And as he stood by his car, phone in hand, speaking softly to confirm the route to the cemetery, his deep baritone voice blending with the cicadas that screeched like nature's endless alarm, the calm scene was shattered by the shriek of tires and the flash of blue and red lights. For Officer Dana Whitaker, a young, ambitious, brash policewoman, barely 3 years into her badge, rolled up with authority radiating off her posture and suspicion dripping from her eyes. Her cruiser angled aggressively as she leapt out, one hand resting on her holster, the other raised like a judge delivering a sentence, and she barked, "Put the phone down. Step away from the vehicle," startling Carter mid-sentence, though his reaction was steady, honed by decades of training under far deadlier confrontations, and he lowered his phone slightly, saying in calm, measured tones, "Ma'am, I'm on a call, just asking for directions." But she was already advancing, eyes narrowed, as if every fiber of her being screamed that his very existence in that SUV was a crime. And she demanded ID with the sharp edge of someone not asking but accusing, insisting his vehicle matched the description of one reported stolen, scoffing at his explanation that he was a retired general just passing through, dismissing him with the venomous phrase, "You people are always making things up." And though the words stung like a slap, Carter's face remained composed, his silence not weakness, but a shield. The same shield that had carried him through interrogation rooms, enemy fire, and political games far more dangerous than this. And as bystanders began to gather, murmuring, unsure whether to trust the officer's certainty or their own eyes, which recognized the gravitas of the man before them, Carter calmly reached into his jacket and produced his ID, the official military-issued identification that bore his full name, rank, and clearance, something that should have ended the entire charade in seconds. But Officer Whitaker barely glanced at it before rolling her eyes, saying with disdain, "Nice fake. Did you get this at a pawn shop?" And then, without missing a beat, she called for backup over the radio. her voice proud and triumphant as she announced, possible stolen vehicle suspect. Male impersonating military personnel, refusing commands, requesting immediate support, while Carter stood motionless, his hands visible, his jaw tight, his heart not racing with fear, but sinking with an exhaustion only a black man in America could fully understand. The exhaustion of giving everything to a country and still being treated as nothing more than a suspect. Within minutes, the quiet station turned into a stage. A second cruiser pulling up, then a third. Young officers spilling out with postures mimicking movies more than training. And a crowd gathering, phones raised, whispers spreading, until one older veteran in the back squinted, rubbed his eyes, and whispered, "Wait, isn't that General Carter?" Sending ripples through the onlookers. But the officers weren't listening, too intoxicated by the rush of authority. As Whitaker stepped forward, grabbed Carter's arm, and forced him against the hood of his own vehicle, metal scorching from the sun, pressing his cheek against it while she snapped handcuffs onto his wrists with satisfaction. And Carter, his voice calm but filled with sorrow, said softly, "This is a disgrace," words that would later echo across the nation. And though he could have ended it instantly with a single call to the Pentagon, he chose to remain still, watching, waiting, almost as if studying the anatomy of injustice in real time. Because he knew this moment wasn't just about him, but about a system. And when his phone buzzed again in his pocket, he looked at her with quiet authority and said, "You might want to answer that." But she snarled, "Stay silent, or I'll add resisting arrest," even as one of her fellow officers began to hesitate, his eyes darting between the 4 silver stars on Carter's shoulders and the growing unease in the crowd, his lips parting as if to speak before shutting again under Whitaker's glare. And then the sound came, faint at first, but undeniable. A low rumble like distant thunder, engines in perfect sync, growing louder and closer until the ground itself seemed to tremble. And over the horizon rolled 6 black military Humvees, paint gleaming, engines roaring, stopping in unison as a dozen soldiers spilled out, boots stomping in choreographed precision, followed by a sleek SUV from which Captain Darius Monroe emerged, tall, commanding, a man whose entire career had been shaped under Carter's mentorship, and his voice boomed like judgment itself as he barked, "Release him now," sending shockwaves through the street, freezing Whitaker mid-motion as the crowd gasped, realizing at last the magnitude of their mistake. But Monroe wasn't finished. He stepped forward, his eyes burning with righteous fury as he addressed the officers. "Do you have any idea who this man is? That's General Richard Elias Carter, 4-star general, recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star to Purple Hearts, and the man who personally led the rescue that saved my unit in Kabul. And you put him in cuffs?" The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the buzz of live-stream notifications as the scene was broadcast to millions. And Whitaker's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she fumbled with the cuffs, stammering, I didn't know." But Carter's reply cut deeper than any reprimand. "That's the problem. You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. his words slicing through the heavy air like a blade, capturing the moral essence of the moment in a single sentence that would soon trend worldwide. While Monroe saluted his mentor, soldiers lined up in formation saluting as well, and the crowd erupted in applause, some even in tears, overwhelmed by the dignity of a man who had endured humiliation with grace. And as the police chief arrived, red-faced and out of breath, demanding explanations, Carter simply turned to him and said, "Train your officers to see the person before they see the threat." Before stepping into his SUV, convoy flanking him, engines roaring as they departed, leaving behind a stunned town and a police department already facing the storm of national scrutiny. By nightfall, the footage had gone viral. Hashtags like "Justice for Carter" and "For Starshame" trending globally. Newscasters replaying the arrest on endless loops. Military leaders giving interviews vouching for Carter's legacy, recounting his heroism in Afghanistan, his guidance to presidents, his speeches to Congress, and his quiet mentorship of the next generation of soldiers, all juxtaposed with the image of him pressed against his own car by officers too blinded by bias to recognize greatness before them. And in the weeks that followed, reforms swept through the department. Anti-bias training mandated, leadership shaken. Officer Whitaker resigning in disgrace, though later requesting a private meeting with Carter, where she confessed, eyes wet with regret, "Why didn't you yell at me? You could have destroyed me." And Carter, sipping tea on his porch, looking over the hills of the land he had fought for, replied softly, "Because someone once gave me a chance to grow, I chose to give you the same," saluting her gently before walking back inside, leaving her with the weight of a lesson she would carry forever. While Carter continued his life quietly, visiting schools, speaking not of medals or battles, but of respect, dignity, and the truth he had lived, that honor isn't stitched into uniforms. It's found in how we treat each other every day, no matter rank, race, or title. And so the legend of General Richard Elias Carter grew not just because of the wars he fought abroad, but because of the war he faced at home and the grace with which he won it.